There he is.
Hello.
What's up,
What's going
man?
on?
How are you?
I'm good. Things have been kind of rough with like the daylight savings. I don't know how it was for you, dude.
Hey, let's talk about it. It's troubling you. What's going on with the daylight?
Yeah.
It must be brutal. I mean, it's the same. I guess it's the same thing for everyone. Actually, did you just see that they're gonna like pass a bill that's gonna get rid of it?
Yeah, I saw that. Actually, I subscribed to this email list called Morning Brew. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I feel like I have, but I'm not subscribed to it. So please keep going.
So yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's like basically they send you an email every day. It's like a cool like recap of everything that's kind of been going on in the world, and
Mm,
you can kind of like choose and select like what kind of news you want to hear about too. So like, but or you can choose like an all around kind of thing where like
hmm
I get like you get like a little bit of like finances of like current events and like stuff like that. And yeah, I just read up on that today where they're talking about a bill. It passed through the Senate, but it's still going through the House.
Yeah.
And yeah, like basically they're talking about like how there are like pros and cons to doing it. Like pros, obviously, like we don't have to do this like stuff that was invented. We don't have to do this that was invented like 100 years ago,
Right.
which like doesn't make sense today. But also they're saying like a lot of the one of like the huge cons is like it does help with like energy consumption. Like people,
Really?
yeah,
By switching the time a forward or back an hour?
yeah, yeah. So like when I think when like the sun sets like an hour earlier or something, like
Hmm
it kind of deters people from going outside and doing stuff and like driving around.
Oh.
Yeah,
So, but
yeah.
but wouldn't that, I guess, from another energy perspective, also this is Austin Chan, by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. We're just going right into it.
This is
Oh
awesome,
yeah.
but from another energy perspective, wouldn't can you say if more people are indoors, they're using energy like electricity or gas for their houses and stuff like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
I,
I'm just a guy reading an email, trying to like dilute this
no,
information to
you
you.
are the
So
expert
don't
on
ask
this
me.
topic.
Don't ask me.
That is why I brought you on here, man. Oh,
Yeah.
but anyways, this is so welcome to the These Little Moments podcast. This is Austin Chan, or otherwise known as Austin Chan Fitness, or maybe by his closest friends, Austin. Right? Fair to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very good assumption. Yeah.
Oh, you're like, no, it's not. They don't call me Austin. So why
Yeah,
don't
actually, I have an entirely separate identity that people call me by.
and that's what we want to get
Yeah.
into today.
Yeah.
So why don't before I'll stop talking, you give us your introduction, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, so I'm Austin Chan. I'm a fitness coach. I've been doing this for 3 years total now. And yeah, I like talking about fitness a lot. So decided to put that on the internet and help more people.
Hmm
Yeah.
Let's also talk about how ripped you are and how
Oh geez, no. Oh God, no.
dude, let's talk about your
Let's not go there.
vascularity. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just critique my physique on the podcast right now.
We'll start with the biceps, okay? We'll work our
Yeah.
way. So welcome, Austin.
Thank you.
And when would because some people call themselves like nutrition coaches, some people call themselves just like, I don't know, trainers. What I guess, like, what type of coach do you see yourself? You don't have to niche yourself, but what do you like? What do you call yourself?
Um, I mean, I just call myself an overall fitness coach, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of just like what I particularly like enjoying talking about, I like definitely like talking about the training aspect of things,
Mm-hmm.
specifically about like hypertrophy related, just because that's the training style that I gravitated most towards. Just starting out on my fitness journey, and even until now, and like
Mm-hmm.
I've always just had a natural tendency or like eye for like biomechanics and all that kind of stuff. Like one of the coolest things, like I found myself going towards when I first started getting in personal training was just like seeing people move. I'm just like, this is fucking awesome. Like
Yeah.
when we learned about oh wait, is it okay if I swear in this?
Yeah, you
Someone
already
catch
did.
it.
Well, let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm like you gotta like censor that or something.
Excuse me while I restart this whole podcast. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So you're good. You're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, so like when I just like first started training, it was super cool. Just like all this stuff I learned in anatomy and physiology, but actually seeing that being applied to people, seeing that people move in real life, it was just super cool to see that. And also like there's only so much you can learn about in the textbook, like versus when you actually see this, like people move in person, and also each person's gonna move slightly different. Each person is built slightly different. So just seeing that in person was just super cool. And then
Yeah.
having to modify exercises and all that. And then from like an in-person standpoint versus like an online standpoint, it's totally different as well. Like online, you can't see that person there. You can't like immediately apply changes. So you kind of have to figure out a different way to communicate to the client versus like in person. You're like, hey, just do this, and then it's
Right.
instantly fixed.
Right. Or you like can physically, if obviously they give you permission to be like, no, like adjust your arm this way or something like that.
Yeah.
So were you an in-person trainer when you started?
Yeah, I still do in person
Awesome.
here and there. Yeah.
Awesome. When did you start doing in person?
That was back in college. I think like 2017 or 2018.
Oh wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
for a long while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was one of the, I think you made a good point. That was one of the cooler things to see is when obviously you hear all these textbooks, people teach you all these things, but then when you actually like try to apply what you learn in a textbook to, what somebody's doing, or like how like, oh, their heels are lifting off the ground, like what does that cue me to have them do next, or to work on that so that maybe we change their biomechanics in a way. So, oh, this is telling us maybe their glutes are weak, or like their hamstrings are weak. I always thought that was a cool thing too.
Yeah, for sure. And then for for whatever it's worth, it's like whatever you see in the textbook, it's like that's not the stuff that you can directly communicate to the clients. Because like if someone's heels come off the ground, you're not going to be like, so according to the textbook, you have limited ankle mobility, and we need to be doing this, this, and this. And then they're be like, what the fuck?
It's just not good what you're doing. Okay, chapter 23 tells us you're in for a long haul here, buddy. It's not good. I love that. And so let's dive into kind of your origin story, because I always like hearing about people's origin stories, because I think it just translates to what they do now. But tell us like a little bit, like, actually, if you want to get like personal too, like where you grew up and all that, and then transition to how you got started into fitness, and then lead us to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So it's kind of like weird how like when I say like tell people that I was born in Iowa, like out of all the places, just in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
Yeah. So Devonport, Iowa is what is on my birth certificate. I don't really remember it much.
But, what the rule makers tell me.
Yeah. Hey, you wanted everything. I'm gonna tell
That's
you
right.
like all my personal information. Just put it out there in the internet.
Please do.
Yeah. So yeah, I was born in Iowa. Grew up there for about 5 years. Like I still remember bits and pieces of it. I just remember a lot of cornfields and snow, and we lived in a pretty small house. And then we grew up there until I was 5. Then we moved to Hawaii, and then that's where I kind of grew up for the majority of my life. And yeah, it was super cool. I don't know if you've ever gotten a chance to visit there, but like one of the things, like I will forever cherish that I got to grow up there, because like a lot of people say it's like part of the US, but like when you're there, it literally feels like it's a different country, it's a different place. There's an overall different vibe. Like of course everyone like speaks English as the main language, but like just the overall culture, the overall like slang, and the just like everything about it is like it feels like a different place.
Where in Hawaii did you grow up?
Oahu.
Oahu.
So that's it's the main island.
Yeah. I was fortunate to have gone on vacation. We went to Maui, we went to Oahu, and then we went to Kauai for like a little bit too. And it was absolutely gorgeous. Like,
Mhm.
I can't believe you. That's pretty awesome. You grew up there.
Yeah.
What a transition too. Like for your parents, you're just like, we don't like Iowa.
Yeah.
Let's go to Oahu. It's like
Yeah.
the complete opposite.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then yeah, we'll kind of fast forward to when I was 13, because like fitness wasn't really a big part of my life then. So 13 was when I first started lifting. That was like middle school. So uh just went along with my friends. And you know, when you first start out, you don't really take it seriously. So I didn't really take it seriously all that much. We would just go in there, bench press every single day, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. And pretty much just did like whatever my friend told us to, because there's like this dude for like a 14-year-old, he's like jacked, six pack and everything. So obviously you have to listen to him, you know.
It's a
Yeah.
non-negotiable when you're at that age.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and then his dad was like a football coach and everything. So like we're like, okay, this dude's kind of legit. I mean, at least at that age, we thought he was
Right.
legit. So yeah, then pretty much all we do is bench press every day. And then at that point, I didn't really take it seriously. Like I said, like it was just on and off. Like I'd lift like during the time we had school, just because that was an after school kind of thing, just to like kill some time. And then during the breaks, of course, I would just like take off completely from the gym. And then by the time school came back up and we went back to the gym, I'm like, wow, why did I lose all my gains?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. Why did this happen? You know, I
It's
took
not
like 4 weeks
fair.
off from lifting. Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah. And it was pretty on and off until about like 18, 19, when I first got into college. Even then, like it was still on and off for like that first year in college. And when I first got into college, I always thought like I'm gonna be an engineer. That was like the my like life goal and all that. I thought it'd be super cool to be an engineer. Went through all the classes and everything until about a year and a half in. I was like, I don't really want to do this for the rest of my life. Like
Mhm.
I loved like learning about all the sciencey stuff and everything, but like it just wasn't a career path I could see myself doing and like
Mhm.
feeling super passionate and fulfilled about. Like it was just one of those things like, you know, you felt like you did it just because it's a good stable job.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I can relate to
Yeah.
that a ton.
Yeah. And then at that point, like I was also really getting into like the whole fitness nutrition thing. I was just consuming a lot of stuff on like YouTube, reading a lot of articles
Mhm.
and all that. And I thought, you know, if I'm spending so much time on this anyway in my free time, then
Yeah.
like why not like make my career out of this?
Mhm.
So I made the switch to kinesiology, and like I loved it. Like all the classes and everything, I just found myself like I didn't really have to study for it, just because like all
Mm.
the information just kind of came to me naturally. And then I think what like my first year into kinesiology, after that, I had this like intro class where they like go through all of the like prospective tracks you can go through with kinesiology. So like
Mhm.
say a lot of people go into like pre-med
Yep.
or physical therapy or occupational therapy, athletic training. And then one of the things that stood out to me the most was athletic training.
Yeah.
And so the like students going through the program at the time, they're like talking about, I'm like, this is super cool to be able to work with athletes and like
Right.
pretty much work with them on like the like uh like the what's the term, like the therapeutic side of things.
Mhm.
And then from then on, I'm like, I'm gonna be an athletic trainer. This is my
Mhm.
life goal now.
Mhm.
And then went through all the courses and everything until I started shadowing the athletic trainer at the university who worked with the softball team. And like it was super cool and everything, look, seeing them go through like all like the tests you got to do, and like all the different modalities they use to treat all the athletes and everything. But also then like I was thinking, I'm like, I can't really relate to these people. Like these are like college athletes who likely have been training their entire lives for this. They are like genetically blessed in a sense. This is just something that they like have been doing for their entire lives, and they were like, they just have a natural gravitation toward it. Whereas I like, you know, I was just that like skinny, overweight kid who grew up like wanting to look better, and I really couldn't relate to these people. I like athletic stuff just does not come naturally to me. I
Mhm.
cannot throw or catch a ball to save my life. So
We'll work on it.
yeah. All right.
I'll fly over to play some catch with you.
Yeah. Catch every Saturday, same time next
That's
week.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, at that time, I'm like, I can't really see myself doing this. So then, and then as far as like the as a part of the kinesiology department, they would usually like send out like email blasts of like career opportunities and all that. And then I got one saying something about like a personal training class they were offering at the university recreation center. So I took that, and I'm like, this, I could definitely see myself doing something like this, because I knew like somewhat of like the personal training field, like you just work with like everyday people to help them get in better shape. And then I felt like I spent a lot of time like in the gym anyways working out. So I'm like, I might as well do this. I feel comfortable in the gym. I feel comfortable like talking to people about stuff I know and stuff I can relate to, versus like the athletic training thing, which is kind of like learning a whole new skill of like, treating athletes and all that. So I did the whole class and then got the A certification, and then we started training people there and loved it. And then the rest is kind of history. And then the whole COVID thing happened, and then I figured like I had to kind of pivot my business somehow, and then came across the mentorship, and here we are.
Wow. So that's so you had an interesting path where it was, one, you started off as an engineer, and now
Mhm.
you're a body engineer, right? You're still an engineer in some way.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting because you said how when you were in engineering, you felt the need you had to study a lot, right? But then when you made the switch to kinesiology, it's not like you didn't have to study, but that material came to you a lot easier.
Mhm.
And it's almost like you probably went back for more even than you didn't have to, because it just interested you so much. So obviously you chose the right career path. And then you went through, because athletic training is no joke in school too. Like that's a very
Mhm.
intense program as well. So it's interesting how you went that route. And I really love your route, because everything you did, you're like, nope, that doesn't fit me. Nope, that doesn't fit me. Instead of like just going through with it, and then like years later, you're like, oh man, I wasted a little time here. Like that's
Yeah.
that's tough. So
Mhm.
I love how you had that journey where you're able to just kind of like really discover like each path. You're like, nope, that doesn't fit me, or I like a little bit of this, but not the entire thing. And then you also said you couldn't relate to the athletes because you were skinny and overweight. So are you saying you were a skinny fat guy?
Yeah. So I grew up like on the thinner side until like my appetite just like suddenly ramped up one day from as far as I can remember. And then
Mm-hmm.
I just started eating a ton,
Mm,
and it just didn't, and then the weight started coming on, and
yeah.
calories in, calories out.
Right. Yeah. Little bulk. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, a bulk with none of the exercise. I'm just
Right.
just bulking for life.
Genius.
Yes.
You gotta preload that mass, man.
Oh yeah.
So you graduated college, and then you became a trainer. Um, so what was like your training style, or what was like the biggest thing you enjoyed working with people on?
So when I first started training, I was also at the time like super into like barbell movements, just because I thought like that's like how I first learned about like fitness in a sense. Like all the training styles that I would picked up were like, oh, focus on these heavy barbell movements,
Mm-hmm.
and then get progressive overload, eat enough calories and all that, and you'll see results. And then I saw a really good results. And then obviously like a lot of people, when they first hear about they start to kind of tie their identity to that. So I found
Yeah.
myself doing that a little bit. So then I started like every single client, I'm like, you got to do these heavy barbell movements. And
Yeah.
then like obviously they like got pretty good results too. But like as my fitness knowledge evolved, like I don't use heavy barbell movements a lot anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
still do incorporate them here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, I can relate to that too. I feel like it's very, when you first start training, you're like, I'm just gonna train these people like I train, right? And you're just
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
and then like looking back, and you're like, oh well, that's not how this should work. It's like just because I'm
Yeah,
interested
I'm
in
like
right, just because I'm
yeah, I'm
interested
like
in like
I shouldn't
kettlebells, or
put
yeah.
a yeah, I shouldn't put a 70-year-old grandma
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we're gonna
run.
do clean and snatch today, Graham. Okay. This is gonna help you get off the floor and play with your grandkids. Okay. This is important.
Yeah. You're gonna get absolutely yacked doing
Yeah.
this. Like
You want to get yoked or what, Grams? I mean, come on. Summer's right around the corner. Yeah, dude, I could
Oh
totally
man.
relate to that. And it's important too, because obviously the person or the trainer you used to be is vastly different than the trainer you are now. And that's how it should
Mm-hmm.
be, right? Like you should be always evolving. um
Mm-hmm.
the thing that really gravitates me towards your content is you have a very science based approach, and I always love people who can take a piece of peer reviewed literature and simplify it for me so I can understand, okay, like this is what this means, this is what this means. What kind of got you into really like looking at peer reviewed literature and kind of like translating it for people?
So I will say like one of the first guys I saw who doing this is Jeff Nippard.
Yeah,
And
the
like
man.
I love his approach. Like he is, if anything, like he's the king of doing that. I
Yeah.
think one of his more recent videos, I think it was like how to get jacked explained in like 5 different levels or something. And it went
Mm,
from like super simple of like, hey, pick up weights, put them down. That's how you get jacked. And
right.
then it like progressively got more and more like technical. So
Mm,
yeah. So I say like Jeff Nipper is one of them. And then like through that, it was just mainly just accumulating more knowledge. And
yeah.
then like one of the driving things also for me was like I want to be able to relate to the average person. So like
Hmm.
I want to be able to break it down as simple as possible. And like something that like if I were to speak to my 13-year-old self, like what would I say?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that approach. And that's so it's funny. I forgot all the videos I've watched of like Jeff Nippards like he was like probably one of the first ones, probably him and Lane Norton
Mm-hmm.
were one of the first people to like break down like this, because it's really like, I don't know about you, but anytime I hear like, very like specific language when it comes to like speaking about hypertrophy or biomechanics, I'm just like I tune out. Like I'm just like, all right, I'm like I can't focus. But
Yeah.
when someone can simplify it in a way where it just feels like we're having a conversation, then that's always when I've been able to learn better. So I love that you have like you've had similar people to me that have really helped you get to that place. um so you also have like a really a big interest in hypertrophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's
Yeah.
could you in layman's terms kind of explain what hypertrophy is to like the person who is a beginner?
Yeah, yeah. So I've been trying to find like a layman's like word for it, but I haven't
Mm,
quite found it. But basically it just means to get bigger muscles. And
mm-hmm,
so I believe the like if we want to get into like the word origins, like trophy is like cell. So like if you think of like muscle atrophy, so A means without, and then trophy means, or I think no, sorry, it means growth.
mm-hmm,
Trophy means growth. And then so if you attach an A at the beginning, it's atrophy, so that's without growth. And then hyper is increased, like an increased rate. So
mm-hmm.
hypertrophy would be an increased rate. And then trophy typically means like of any cells, but it's been said so many times that like it in terms of like the fitness industry, when you talk about hypertrophy, we're mainly talk about muscle growth, because otherwise I don't think you want growth of any other type of cells in your body. That would
Right.
be cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I would love, because I think it'd be really beneficial for like any beginner or even somebody who just wants to build muscle. Like I would love to just like get a good takeaway from you about this. But I guess where would somebody start if their goal is to build muscle?
Yeah. So there's a
It's
lot
a
we can go
loaded
into, but
question.
yeah, yeah, it is.
I
Like,
just for those listening, I just dropped like the Mother Earth of questions.
yeah.
It's not a simple question.
Well, first you want to look at your programming, and then you want to,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I
So
guess, yeah, keep it as simple as possible. I know it could go
yeah,
very
yeah.
convoluted.
So we'll say for like for anyone out there who's just getting started, like the most simple way you can go about building more muscle is just progressive overload, or just simply focus on trying to lift more weight over time.
Hmm.
Because eventually, if you do that enough, you will eventually see progress. Like it doesn't matter what lifts you do, doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter how you execute them. Like always, will lift with good form.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if you lift with good form and you try to lift more weight over time, you will see progress in some sense. Like you don't have to worry about like optimal biomechanics. You don't have to worry about like, oh, should I bulk or should I cut? Like how much
Hmm.
protein I should get. But people vastly underestimate how much like training hard with an adequate intensity and also just trying to progressive overload over time or increase the amount of weights you can lift over time. So like you don't have to be necessarily going from the 5-pound dumbbell to the 100-pound dumbbell like in a week, but like just focusing on like, hey, I did the 5-pound dumbbell pretty easily this time. So maybe I'll go up to the 7.5 and to the 10, and then eventually you will see progress. And that's just the base of it. Like your body is going to have to adapt in some sense if you go from lifting the 5-pound dumbbell to the 30-pound dumbbell a few weeks from now.
Yeah, absolutely. So progressive overloads, it's people hear all the time. And basically what you just said is that you should try to get better each week, right? So like whether you can curl 5 pounds for 12 reps, and then the next week you attempt 7.5 pounds for the same amount of reps, or within some sort of rep range, right? I'm just now realizing how big of a bomb of a question I dropped on you, because there's so many ways we can go with this. But I do want to make sure we can at least give somebody some sort of takeaway like from this, to like really get a good start on how to build muscle. So we have progressive overload, right? Which is, like we said, that principle where you should just be trying to get better some way each week, right? So let's kind of start with this. Let's start with the person who, why is it a disservice for somebody who tries to just lift the same amount of weight every week?
So if we think about this from first, I think I heard this from Alan Aragon. Like basically, all of our bodily processes are primed for survival. And if we think about progressive overload, it's basically just an adaptation to that. Because if you lift let's say if you started with a 10-pound dumbbell, and then you lift that and like, oh wow, that was pretty hard, and you like went like pretty close to muscle failure, and like or I don't want to get too much into that, but
maybe down the line
we can, yeah.
There's so
this
much
loaded question, we could go down so many rabbit holes. But like, let's say you're training pretty hard. Yeah, let's say you lift that 10-pound dumbbell, you did 10 reps, and you're like, wow, that like 8, 9, 10th rep, that was pretty tough. And so to your body, that was like, okay, this weight, like your body doesn't know whether that's dumbbell or whether that was a huge rock trying to crush you. That you're like, wow, that was pretty heavy. Like if we don't adapt to this next time, maybe that 10-pound dumbbell or rock or whatever is going to fall down and crush us. So we need to go through the bodily processes to adapt to that, so we can lift more weight, so that next time this happens, we don't get crushed by that rock, and then we can lift that weight easily. And so if you go into the gym just lifting the same amount of weight, you're not stimulating the need for adaptation for your body.
You explained that beautifully. Well done.
Yeah.
So my question from that is, okay, so that you need that the body will, adapt and try to get stronger, so that, like you said, based off the basic survival need, so that you don't get crushed or anything like that. What essentially, and again, as simply as possible, what does the body do to essentially create that adaptation?
Yeah, so
super simple as possible.
Yes. So yeah, the reason why I'm laughing is because my mind first went to like literally all of the like the bodily processes, like mTOR and all that. So I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
God, yeah.
let's but no,
Very specific.
But basically your body, like, yeah. But basically your body senses all that, and then it goes like, let's just say there are a bunch of like backstage processes that your cells undergo and sense all of that stuff, and then eventually it signals to the muscles, hey, we got to build more muscle fibers so that we can actually lift more weight.
Yeah, absolutely. And and this is why I'm enjoying talking to you about this and asking you about this, because obviously you have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to hypertrophy. So that's why I love how your first thought goes to like the very nitty gritty, like cellular, like you're just like, oh,
yeah.
But yeah, so could you talk about sort of just a little bit, you had, obviously you need to utilize progressive overload. Obviously we talked about how the body will adapt so you can get stronger. What does the sort of nutritional aspect look like to pair with progressive overload?
Yeah, so the few key things that are required for muscle growth are energy and protein. So, and then couple that with training, of course. But then in terms of the just like the pure like nutritional aspect, because if we think about muscles, like you're just trying to build a house or something, you need materials and you need energy to do that. So you need adequate protein, and then of course we can go with like the general recommendations of like 0.8 to 1 gram protein per body weight. But I mean, studies have shown that like you can even build that as little as like 0.5 or half a gram of protein per pound of body weight. And then the main thing is, of course, having adequate energy to do that. And that's going to come in the form of calories. And then, of course, we can go into the whole nitty gritty of like, oh, can I build muscle and lose fat at the same time? Or like, oh, what if I'm skinny and I want to bulk up and all that?
Yeah, well, we will dive into it because
All
like
right.
I said, I love like I haven't really talked about this stuff in a while. I forgot how much I love like the process of building muscle. That's comes from like my when I used to do like bodybuilding ish stuff back in the day. But so let's talk about that. So let's talk about the newbie gains, right? So let's talk about if somebody's just starting out, what's like the I guess ideal, like what phase should it be in a calorie wise, what protein intake wise, and we'll talk about optimization after that.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. So if you're someone who has new gains to experience, I will say like you don't have to dial in your nutrition all that much, just because the whole reason behind like the phrase newbie is because you're like new to weight training. You're a newbie in weight training. So that means in terms of the stimulus of weight training for your body, it is completely new for your body, and your body will adapt to it just because it's so new. It's something that you've never done before. So you're going to make a huge amount of progress in a short amount of time. And honestly, that's the only period of time in your life where you're going to make so much progress in such a fast amount of time. Because let me tell you, Ryan and I, we've been doing this for a while. It doesn't get easier.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm just thinking, I'm like, if only I can go back in time and just give myself like the ideal, like you're gonna eat this, you're gonna lift this, okay,
Yeah.
and we're gonna make the most of this time, okay, buddy, like
yeah. I'm thinking about like, why did I do that? That was
right,
not optimal.
right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, like I don't know about you, but I can just like same thing. I could just remember going into like the school gym and like curling on like a Thursday and like, oh, you guys want to do some triceps too and some calves? Okay, that's great. And like you're just like, so that's why, obviously if you're someone who's just beginning, take the most advantage. Like there's so much potential, right? When you first start working out, and then pair that potential with, eating at an optimal nutrition level, right? And then pair that potential with consistency and focusing on good form, and like that's like the bread and butter, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then although I will say like, because like I said, it's a newbie gain phase, you can
Right,
pretty much do anything. Like I'm
right,
sure we both still saw like a decent amount of
yeah,
progress, even though our diet and training was like complete shit.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But with that being said, you can always improve. You can always try to optimize things wherever you can. So yeah, honestly, I forgot the initial question.
The initial question, so let's just reel it back to you're brand new to working out. You know, how could you sort of optimize your nutrition and your fitness to get the most out of, the newbie gain phase?
Yeah, so I will say it's definitely dependent on what your starting point looks like. So for a lot of people who are like overweight and they have a lot of fat to lose, they'll be like, oh, can I build muscle and lose fat at the same time? I've heard to optimize muscle growth, you want to be in a calorie surplus. And so I will say that if you have a lot of weight to lose, you can absolutely build a lot of muscle in a calorie deficit, although it isn't quote unquote optimal. But
Right.
like, truth be told, like if you are overweight and if you have a lot of fat to lose, I'm gonna be real with you, your life has been a bulk. Your life has been a calorie surplus up until this point.
Right,
So
exactly.
if you want to reel things back, like obviously I'm not gonna tell you to like, oh, just eat in a calorie surplus and gain even more weight. So which is like neither conducive to your health nor like your attitude towards your like own physical appearance and all that. So you can definitely be in a calorie deficit and build muscle at the same time. And also because your body is so fresh to weight training, like you will make a lot of gains just even though you're in a calorie deficit. And if we think about fat on your body, fat is literally just excess calories, it's excess energy stored in your body. So a lot of the energy that will be required for muscle growth can come from your fat stores.
Yeah.
And then kind of on the
Go ahead.
and then kind of on the other end, if you are someone who's like skinnier, then you would definitely benefit from eating more calories, being in a calorie surplus, and then shuttling all of those extra calories toward muscle growth. And a lot of people don't realize like muscle growth is an energy intensive process. So like you can't build muscle in a calorie deficit forever. Like if you lost a significant amount of weight, then and you were making gains up until then it might be something to consider going back into maintenance and then heading into a calorie surplus from there.
So I think you just did an amazing job of outlining. So if you're somebody who's obviously, in any case we're talking, you're brand new to working out. If you're somebody who has weight to lose, right? Your body is already at an optimal place where you don't need to intake more calories, right? You don't need to intake more energy because you have stored energy in your body so that you can be in a deficit and still see optimal results, right? I think a very common term that's thrown around is skinny fat, right? Could you kind of explain what skinny fat is and maybe how you would program somebody from a nutritional place to make optimal gains?
Optimal gains.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So skinny fat, it's the, I don't even think it's like a real term. It's just some made up term by fitness
it's a made up term.
Basically, yeah. Yeah. And then my mind goes back to the Avengers, I think it's Avengers Endgame or Infinity War, where like Thor's like, well, all words are made up. I don't know if you remember that scene.
So is that when he's already fat?
You got me thinking. No. It was when he first stumbled upon the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
Where he was floating in space and he got
so he's making fun of like Chris Pratt.
Yeah. That's a made up word. He's like, all words are made up.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're a Marvel nerd like me. That's great.
Oh yeah, I love him. And then that's something we can probably go on to later.
Yes.
But let's what were we talking about? Skinny fat. Yeah. So skinny fat is pretty much like you're skinny from the sense that you don't have much muscle definition or muscle mass in your body, but also at the same time, you're not someone who has like probably a visible six pack. You're not someone who might be considered lean. So you still have a good amount of fat on your body. So it's kind of having both of those qualities. And then as for programming, I would say for most people who are skinny fat, you probably don't have years of training experience down your belt. Cause like if you did, then you probably would have a decent level of muscle mass and you probably wouldn't consider yourself skinny fat. But in terms of like training, focus on progressive overload. Again, like because your body just so primed to weight training, you're going to take advantage of those newbie gains. And because of that, you don't have to be in a calorie surplus. And also if you did get into a calorie surplus, then you would probably like start putting on a little bit more extra body weight. And then you probably wouldn't be like so keen at that, just because when you're adding fat mass, you're like, it can really mess up with like your body image of yourself. So usually I recommend like eating a high protein diet and also focusing around maintenance. And so with maintenance, you have enough calories that you can shuttle some of those calories towards muscle growth, but also at the same time, you don't like spill over too much and put on a bunch of extra body fat as a result of that surplus.
Yeah, that's usually, so that's typically how I'll program someone too, has very similar goals. Because I think more often than not, and maybe you can agree with this, is that when you get somebody who's like that, they want to just lose weight, right? Because they think that they think that the fat that they have is what's preventing them from seeing like muscles and all that stuff, right? But in actuality, like you had just mentioned, is that, you know, and it's, I guess it's dependent too, like on, it's always depends, but dependent on, you know, whether they would feel more comfortable losing a little bit of fat while also doing strength training, from just like you had touched on, like a body confidence type of appeal and approach. So it is dependent. I would say, like you said, I would say probably more optimal to be at maintenance, right? Because
Hmm.
once you just put on more like lean muscle mass, then your appearance is just going to change, right? It's just like
Hmm.
you'd almost rather just have that body recomposition, than try to just lose more fat.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. I like that you touched on the point that a lot of people think, like, because we're so slammed with, especially nowadays, like with the like vast amount of like fitness content out there, like
Mhm.
we're so constantly bombarded with like, oh, if you want to lose fat, be in a calorie deficit. If you want to lose fat, be in a calorie deficit, and just
Yeah.
everywhere. So naturally, we want to think that, oh, I'm skinny fat. That just means I have a bunch of extra fat in my body, and we think I just need to lose all this fat and then I'm good, and then they
Right.
get into a calorie deficit, and then they don't see the results that they want. Where in fact, like if you are skinny fat, like by and large, 99.999% of the time, it's not because you have too much fat in your body, it's because you don't have enough muscle mass.
Mm.
And a lot of people think that like, oh, muscle mass is just like, I'm just gonna look bulky or whatever. But like if you like, a lot of people don't realize if you build more muscle mass and have more muscle mass on your frame, you are actually going to look leaner as a result of that, just
Hmm.
because muscle mass is lean body mass. A lot of people think like, oh, body fat percentage is just, oh, how much body fat do I have? But instead, it's like it's a body fat percentage, which means it's a percentage of your fat mass versus your lean body mass. So if you can
Hmm.
increase that lean body mass, you will indirectly lower your body fat mass. Like you won't necessarily be like losing fat mass, but the percentage will come down because your body weight's going up, but it's not because you're accumulating more fat mass.
Hmm. Yeah, that was wonderfully said, my friend. Wonderfully
Yeah.
said. Um, and yeah, I think that's important to note, is that too, like the benefits of increasing your lean body mass, right? I mean, just from a nutritional perspective, it increases the amount of calories you can consume, right? And still like be
Mhm.
at maintenance. So maybe what your maintenance was starting at your skinny fat stage, it would most likely increase due to the amount of muscle that you're building, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just
Muscle just simply burns more calories like at
yeah.
rest, like versus like some fat sitting on your body that's not really doing anything. It's just
Yeah.
waiting to be used.
Yeah. One of the funniest things I hear, and it's something I probably used to say when I did not know anything I was talking about, but people are always like, oh, well, fat, you know, weighs more than fat, blah, blah, blah. I'm just
Oh,
like,
geez. I had a feeling you're gonna go there.
I'm just like, I'm like, if you have, and my sister said this to me the other day, and I laughed so hard because I go, if you have 5 pounds of muscle and then you have 5 pounds of fat, how does muscle weigh more than fat? And she's like, well, she's like, well, uh, I don't know. It's just it's heavier, and I'm just like, it's 5 pounds versus 5 pounds. I'm like, 5 pounds is 5 pounds.
Yeah.
But could you
Mhm.
talk about what people actually mean when they say that? Because obviously it's not a difference in weight.
Yeah, and this is one of I think this was like back in like elementary school when people like had a very hard time understanding in science class, like, oh, how like what's heavier, a pound of lead or a pound of feathers? And people were
Right.
like, well, definitely the pound of lead is heavier.
Right.
And then, and then this is like pretty much the same identical concept,
Mm-hmm.
except it's with muscle and fat. And basically, if we think about weight is always going to be the same. Like 5 pounds of this, 5 pounds of that. It's always going, like if you put that on the scale, it is always going to be 5 pounds of that.
Mm-hmm.
But when people get confused, it's because they see the amount of volume that's in there. So if you were to
Mm-hmm.
look at 5 pounds of muscle versus 5 pounds of fat, 5 pounds of muscle is going to look much smaller in size and look a lot more dense because it
Mm-hmm.
has less volume, it takes up less space. Whereas fat is more voluminous and has lower density, which means it takes up a lot more space
Mm-hmm.
with that same amount of weight. So like from a visual perspective, it looks heavier, but when you look at the actual weight itself, it's the exact same.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Again, well done. So it's essentially, yeah, it's just muscle is dense. So it takes up less
Mhm.
surface area. and fat is has more volume, so it's going to take up more surface area, which is a reason why it could be dangerous, right, in the body.
Mhm.
So well done. I think we've done a pretty good job. Just to touch quickly, because I did you did say it, and I was like, I do want to circle back to it. So when you're
Mhm.
lifting, you had briefly touched on muscle failure.
Yes.
Could you again
Yeah.
asking a lot out of you here, but could you simply explain what muscle failure is, and how you can incorporate it in your workouts?
Yeah. So muscle failure is basically the point where you cannot complete, and of course, and then oh man, we can. There's they're like,
The wheels
and
are
then they're like,
turning.
yeah, and then there are like multiple definitions for muscle failure. Like you'll hear people say like, oh, technical failure, and then there's like absolute failure
Hmm.
and all that. And so we're just mainly going to talk about like technical failure, just because I think for all of your lifts, you should be performing your lifts with good technique. And basically the difference is like technical failure is you complete a set
Hmm.
without rest, of course, all the way until you cannot complete another good rep with good form. Whereas absolute failure, you're just like you keep going until you literally cannot perform another rep, no matter how shitty your form looks.
Right.
So we're gonna be mainly talking about technical failure, just because I think for the purposes of lifting, we always want to maintain as good form as possible. That doesn't mean you can't let your form slip here and there, but like for the good, like your form should be 90% like on par with like textbook good form. But basically muscle failure is just going to the point until you can't do any more reps. So like let's say you did 50 pounds and like you did 10 reps with that, you cannot complete another 11th rep with good form, no matter how hard you tried.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in terms of how you can practically apply that to your training, like in order for your muscles to get enough of that stimulus for adaptation, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, uh, you have to be training close enough to that point in order for your body to sense all that stuff, to undergo all of the sciencey adaptations, to build more muscle, gain more strength, and all that. So yeah. And then
Yeah.
for a lot of people, like just I'll be honest, like people don't simply get close enough to that point, which is why they don't see the progress that they're after.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's and that's, obviously that's something we try to get out of all of our clients, because I feel like even in-person clients, when I used to do a bunch of in-person, so many people were scared to lift heavier weights. And it's just like you're watching someone, you're just like, you could do way more weight than this. Like, what are we doing here?
Mhm.
Like, you're wasting our time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's I think that's so true, that there's so much room for increasing the intensity in your workouts so that you can yield the results that you really want, right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, 100%. And then I will say, like with my in-person clients, especially, like I ask them a lot, like, hey, how hard was that set? Well, on a scale from 1 to 10, with like, one being like just sitting on the couch, and then 10 being like I could not force another rep if I tried.
Right.
And then usually they'll like say a pretty high number, and then I will always take that number and like subtract like 2 or 3 from it, just
Right.
just because like honestly, like most of us, like, and this is something that I find myself like kind of like um being at fault of too. Like we all of us, we vastly underestimate like how much more reps we can do, because like when we're under the bar, when we're in that machine, when we're doing that lift, we're like, our muscles are burning, this feels super hard, I feel
Mhm.
like I maybe only have this much left. When in reality, like if you had someone standing there, say a trainer, and then they're looking at you, they're like, that wasn't really that hard, you could have busted out at least 5 more reps.
Right.
So like from like a subjective perspective, like we always underestimate how much more we can do. So I think like an immediate practical thing you can do right now is just start. I know as weird as it feels to film yourself in the gym, like just start filming your sets and then seeing how hard that actually looked on camera.
Mhm.
Because I guarantee you, like when you look at yourself in the camera, you're gonna be like, wow, that didn't look that hard. Like it looked like I could have pushed myself way harder.
Yeah, that's actually a great practical point, is just film yourself and see if you struggled or not, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you could do it more. So there's a couple of things I'll say. Like, you have your scale where you're like sit on the couch, or like 10 being ridiculously hard. I
Yeah.
remember I just had a flashback when I would train clients in person. I'd be like,
Uh-huh.
1, this was ridiculously easy, or 10, you're about to shit your pants by how hard
Yeah.
this was, like this was about to do. So like that's just vast. It's just two different coaches right there. um
Yeah.
and then 2, I think like you had mentioned it is a difficult thing because I feel like the root of it comes down to people are always scared of failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's mentally, whether it's nutritionally, whether it's in life, whatever the case may be, and especially exercise, right? Like I had a few clients back in the day who were just scared of like if we were squatting and like they couldn't get the weight back up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a fear, and sometimes people's fear of failing the exercise or failing a rep is what holds them back from increasing the intensity and getting and reaching that their potential that they really could get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then I will say like, and that's why like at first, like when you asked me that basic question of like, we can get into like muscular failure and all that, like,
Mm,
or no, your question was like, what's one like rule for everyone? I like honestly progressive overload, because like eventually if you just keep progressing, you're eventually going to find that point of muscular failure. It's just that
hmm.
if you do the same thing every single workout, then you're never going to find that point or know what it feels like.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like just having that awareness of what it should feel like, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then and then I don't know if we have time to get into it. Then I was just like, well, what if you can't lift any more weight? What's other like modalities or methods you can use? And I was just like, I don't know if we should.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if we should get into tempos and all that stuff yet, but maybe we'll bring you
Yeah.
back on for like a part two hypertrophy to get like actually that'd be a good. Would you want to do like a part two down the line?
Oh yeah, for sure, dude.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All
And
right.
then
So
we can
we'll
talk
bring
about Marvel and all that too. Yeah.
yeah, we'll talk
Yeah.
about well be real quick, who's your favorite Marvel hero?
Ooh. It used to be Iron Man, but
Mm,
recently I've been loving Doctor Strange.
dude, I support to be honest, I never liked Iron Man movies by themselves. I always liked
Mhm.
Iron Man when he interacted with other Avengers. Just
Yeah.
I felt like that's like true, like, yeah, like this is Tony. He's interacting with like a literal god and he's still being like a smart ass. I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's my favorite type of Iron Man. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like I mean, honestly, dude, like in Infinity War when Thor comes down to the field and like I was just like, oh, like chills. I'm just like, I want to be Thor. So I think Thor might be my number
Hmm.
one like Marvel hero.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Yeah.
you like that strongest Avenger
Dude, I love the
vibe.
strong, not only the
Yeah.
strongest, but just like lightning bolts like coming out of nowhere. Character
Hmm.
arc I thought was great because he's just like this, pompous prince of Asgard, and then like he's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
then he has to lose everything, evolve. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's like progressive overload.
Oh
It's just
yeah.
like
Yeah, as he progressively overloaded through the Marvel series, you
dude,
know.
that's right. And then he bulked up
Yeah.
at one point, right? And then
Oh
he
yeah, yeah, yeah.
anyways, so
Oh
so
man.
I do want to ask you the question I asked everyone on this podcast before we hop off. So
Mm,
obviously, the name of this podcast is called These Little Moments, and basically, I called it this podcast because through certain life events that I've had, I've come to realize that a lot of life's moments, like the big moments we have, are the result of little moments that we might have overlooked. Can you think of like a little moment in your life that has kind of led you to be the person that you are now?
that's a loaded question,
It
man.
is a loaded
Jeez,
question.
man.
It's the whole podcast is loaded
Oh man, I should
questions.
have, yeah. Oh man, I should have done my homework and prepared
No, I
prepared in
dropped this
advance for this
randomly
question.
on everybody, so
Yeah.
there's no way you can prepare.
Oh man. Oh, um, honestly, like I wouldn't say like any particular one moment, but just knowing that like you can and you will get through the hard shit in life, and like
Hmm.
with that single mentality that I've constantly told myself through all of the kind of like deep valleys and all that. Man, now you got me like rethinking my like running my like entire life on replay and like really getting me emotional and all that. But
Good.
yeah, just like all of the hard shit that happens in your life, just like know that you will get through it. You just got to take it one day at a time, and that it might not be the lowest moment in your life, and just keep going, and you will eventually make through it, and then you will eventually see the light at the end of the tunnel. And really, we can't really appreciate life for all of the high moments that we have unless we go through these shitty moments.
Mhm.
And yeah, just keep
Oh,
going and keep learning, keep trying to do better, 1% better every day. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I love that, and it's definitely reflective of like your journey where you ran into many obstacles and you ran into points where you're like, I don't want to do this, and it might have been scary or fearful to accept that and try to find something else that you do enjoy doing, to lead you where you are now. So I
Mhm.
appreciate you, dude. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
Of course, and we'll have a part two that we'll get more in depth and more specific, so that if you're more of like an advanced lifter, it'll pertain more to you for sure. But yeah, man. So please tell people where they could find you anywhere and anywhere.
Yeah, so basically all my stuff is going to be under Austin Chan Fitness, AUSTIN fitness, and that's my Instagram, my website. My podcast is called Build a Better You, and yeah, that's about it. If you Google that, I think all my stuff pops up if you Google Austin Chan Fitness. But yeah,
Okay.
that's about it.
Perfect, man. Well, thank you so much, dude. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, man.
Of course, man. I'll stop and we'll chat a little bit after, and then but yeah, so make sure you guys go follow Austin. Hope you guys enjoyed the hypertrophy and the Marvel
Yeah.
talk at the end. But we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, man.
Yeah. All right. See you.